All right, histology, connective tissue. Let's continue. This is connective tissue proper. There are 6 different types, and we're going to go into each of these and identify the different structures inside that you as a student are required to know in order to pass your lab class. So let's get into it. In this picture, we have adipose tissue. So what does it look like from someone who's not familiar with the tissue itself? It probably looks like maybe little rings or bubble shapes, and that's how you're going to identify it when you are approaching the lab practicum. Look for something that's kind of bubble-like and has a lot of white in it. That's going to be adipose tissue. And distinguishing features are going to be these large white circles. And it's white because the fat doesn't take up the dye of the pink or purple very well. And what you do see remaining is that thin pink or purple thin line, and that's actually the cell membrane of one cell. So there's probably 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, like maybe 15 cells that are featured in this clip here. And an adipose site, you can identify it by its very small nucleus that's usually along the border. So if you could see right over here, that's where I indicated the nucleus of an adipose site. You might even see one right here, there's another, and there's another. And the function of adipose is to both store fat to be later used as energy. It also helps with cushioning, organs throughout the body, and also helps to insulate. As you'll also notice here, I indicated there are no fibers found within this connective tissue proper. What you'll find is that in connective tissue proper, typically there will be fibers. Adipose tissue is not one of those tissues, so that's another exception. You'll see that in the following slides that there'll be line, stringy features that will indicate fiber present, but here all we see are the thin lines of the cell membrane for the adipose site cells. Now, since I mentioned that there's no fibers in adipose tissue, that lends to the reason why it's indicated here as loose connective tissue proper. Loose is regarding the density and ratio between the ground substance and the matrix to the fibers present. And so we'll talk more about that as we see other tissues that do present with fibers. Next, we have areolar connective tissue, which falls under, again, the loose category. And as you can see, that is true, seeing how that this picture here shows not something that's very densely packed. It looks very teased if you think about all these fibers, the thin purple and the thick pink colored lines. Those are all fibers that are mixed together, but they also have some fluid that helps to tease apart this tissue pattern, and that fluid is going to be considered that ground substance, as you see here in my note in gray. Now, let's get into who's actually here and what are they doing. We have what are called fibroblast. Fibro referring to fiber, blast referring to the stem cells. So we have fiber stem cells. That means these cells produce fiber. Who are the fibers they produce? That's elastin fibers and collagen fibers. Elastin fibers are going to be utilized for the stretching, but most importantly, the recoiling for returning back to shape. So it gives that flexibility and resiliency to that structure. And then there's collagen, which also provides just significant structure. That's why you hear about people getting like collagen injections, because collagen provides structure for our skin, which brings me to my point that collagen is going to be a very abundant protein that you're going to see throughout the body. And so in here, who's the fiber? That is important. Elastin and collagen. Collagen is going to be in pink, and then you see a lot of that almost like predominantly. And then elastin fibers are the thin lines that are scattered. You have the fibroblasts that are going to be the large fiber cells, but you also have like mast cells that are in there. I didn't indicate in this picture, but I believe right over here, that would be a mast cell, and likewise that one. They usually are much larger. Now, extracellular matrix, ECM, I indicated that over here. ECM means that this is the environment outside of the cell. Extra outside, cellular referring to the cell. So the environment outside of the cell regarding the fibroblast would be the fibers and the ground substance. And since the fibers and the ground substance ratio is not densely packed and that they're pretty even balanced, like ratio, that is what makes areolar connective tissue proper loose, because If it was dense, there'd be less ground substance. If it was loose, there's going to be a lot of ground substance. Okay, so the more teased the fibers are and loosely packed, again, that's considered loose. Areolar tissue, as far as its function, is going to be an abundant tissue found throughout the body. Areolar connective tissue usually helps in supporting the organs, and you'll see that it's supporting within vasculature. Areolar connective tissue is usually what follows epithelial tissue, since this is very vascularized, meaning it has a lot of blood vessels. Areolar tissue does have capillaries running through it. I'm not identifying in this picture particularly. However, it's good to know that that's there. And because there's a lot of ground substance, that's an indication of vascularity, an indication of blood vessels present, capillaries primarily, because the fluid within the blood vessel is what provides the fluid in the tissue. And so to give you an example of where areolar tissue is abundant is underneath skin or anything that's of epithelial lining material, because epithelial tissue, if you recall, is avascular, meaning it does not have its own blood supply. So it relies on the deeper tissue, connective tissue, to provide that nutrient blood supplying feature and providing oxygen to make sure those epithelial cells stay alive. So areolar tissue is literally anywhere there is lining and then some. So, a little trick is, if you don't know which connective tissue proper it is, most likely it's areolar. If you had to guess, that's like a really good default one. So just a little pro tip. The last of the loose connective tissue proper variety is reticular. Reticular, the word itself, is rooted in describing something that's like a network. And so you could see here, it's very much like a network with like the black features. If you were to just look at this slide plainly and just describe it using what you see in the real world, I would look at this and think it's maybe like grapes or like blueberries or just like very fruity little dots on like a little vine. And that's one of the best ways to indicate that this is reticular. Of the slides of connective tissue proper, it usually presents as like the darkest and has a lot of dark black or purple compared to maybe like the white adipose. So just if you had to use context clues to help distinguish yourself from like different slides, that's one thing you could rely on. Now moving on to the features of reticular tissue, we have what's called reticulocytes, macrophages, and lymphocytes. So this tissue is primarily going to be found in areas of the lymph nodes, spleen, liver, and bone marrow. And these are areas where there's a lot of immune functions taking place and cleaning up of systems. So just to kind of simplify it for now, because this is not the most popular tissue that your professors typically talk of, it's just good to know that you will find these types of tissues within areas where there's support for blood cells and lymph nodes because of the lymphocytes present. So reticular tissue associated with lymph nodes, spleen, and liver. Okay, and there are the darker fibers. So you'll see comparatively, reticular fibers are going to die pretty well, and there is ground substance that you can identify with that contrast of white to the purple and black, and that's how you know it's loose. Thanks for sticking around this far, because I have so much more to share. I'm going to do a part 2 for the dense connective tissue proper series. And then, again, if you want more information, please make sure to follow. Let me know that this is helping you. And if you do want more information, comment below Tutor and we'll set up a free consultation. See you in the next video.